Sound check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Ludden. I'm a reporter at the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com. You can text 408-302-1810, or you can call 480-937-1253. We may not get to all audience questions, but we will certainly do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from the Republican candidates for the State House and Legislative District 27, which includes most of Northwest Phoenix, Peoria, and Glendale. And this is a primary election debate. Candidates are competing against others in their party to become the official party nominee. All registered voters, including independent voters, can vote in the primary. Independent voters can choose a single party ballot they wish to vote. This evening, we will hear from two candidates for the House who will debate their partisan opponent for approximately 1 hour. Candidates, you'll have about a minute for your opening and closing statements and about 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments after they conclude speaking, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we will remind the candidates in the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may be informed. Alrighty, so in the House, voters get to vote for two candidates in Legislative District 27. Two of the candidates with us tonight are Republicans Lisa Fink and Brian Morris. Candidates Linda Bussum and Tony Rivera were also invited but declined to participate. So we'll start by alphabetical order, then alternate who responds first from there. So let's go ahead and get started with opening statements. Ms. Fink, why don't you go first whenever you're ready?
Thank you. My name is Lisa Fink, and I am running again for the Arizona State House of Representatives for LD27. And first of all, just introduce myself. I am married with and a mother of 6 children. I have been active down at the state legislature for over a dozen years. I have been participating as a member of Mommy Lobby AZ, which is seeking for school choice, parental rights. And then also with that, I'm now president of the Protect Arizona Children Coalition, which is seeking to protect children from comprehensive sexuality education and also, again, to strengthen parental rights. I have been chairman of the Arizona State Constitutional Commemoration Committee, and that, again, is to promote the principles of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I'm a member of the Arizona Conservative Leaders, and I'm also a board president of Choice Academies, which is a charter school, and I was one of the founding members of that. So I have been active in my community quite a bit. Now, I am saying it for my kind of tagline as I'm running as a principled constitutional conservative. We have, excuse me, we have strayed from constitutional principles, and that's why we're seeing so many bad results. My effort would be, if I'm elected, to stand up and fight for those constitutional principles so that we can have freedom and prosperity for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then Mr. Morris, whenever you're ready.
My name is Brian Morris. I'm running for the State House of Representatives here in LD27. I am a long-term native member of this district, which is what compelled me to run. I actually grew up, went to school, and still lived in the areas. My house where I grew up on 48th and Cactus is still owned by our family. And my parents both taught in the Glen Union High School District. So we were very entrenched in this area. I'm a father of 3 wonderful girls and 5 grandchildren, and recently became a father again 2 days ago. So I'm pretty excited to have a little bouncing baby boy as I endeavor this journey. I am running as a person who is concerned about the actual issues that are involved in our district. Right now, we have a really big increase in homelessness that's been forced into our district, which is driving the crime rates up, not only just property crimes, violent crimes, fentanyl crimes, sex crimes. Everything is skyrocketing over the last 5 years. These are big issues that need to be addressed at a local level. As a candidate, I talk about these issues. As a legislator, I'm going to be able to do something about these issues. I own a company called We Fix Ugly Pools. I've been in business employing people for over 20 years, and we have been a strong supporter of the community to the point where I am the only candidate endorsed by law enforcement. I'm supported by Glendale, Phoenix, and Peoria law enforcement, and recently received the Arizona Police Association's endorsement 2 days ago. So I have a strong belief that we need to have good support for our law enforcement officials in order to tackle some of these issues that are plaguing our district.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. All right. Well, Mr. Morris, you will answer our first question tonight. It's pretty topical. Lawmakers recently passed a budget this year that cut more than $1.4 billion to make ends meet after overspending last year. In your opinion, what was the most damaging cut in that budget, and what areas of government do you think should have been cut deeper, if any?
I actually haven't had a chance to review the final budget yet. They just voted on it like last Friday, just last week. And so we haven't seen all of the parts of it that I've had a chance to review. And obviously going with the pregnancy, I couldn't speak openly about that to have a comprehensive answer for you.
Fair enough. Ms. Fink?
Well, I believe we have too much government. So I do not believe there's anything, quote, damaging in regards to that, because that puts more money into the hands of the taxpayer. And if there is more cuts, it would be potentially regulatory agencies so that we can promote more of the free enterprise and free market, which helps in increasing the engine of prosperity.
Chat. And we have a voter question coming in. Where do you stand on the issue of abortion? Ms. Fink, I believe you're first this time.
Well, I am definitely pro-life. I have 6 kids. That's kind of obvious there. But also, I believe that, if we were to make any changes to the pre-Roe law, I would have definitely stated that there would be an option for those women who have been committed to a crime, such as rape or incest. And then also there's been some concerns about getting health care for miscarriages, because also miscarriages can be termed spontaneous abortion. And so this abortion law would definitely not apply to that, but I am pro-life.
Okay, and Mr. Morris?
I'm a strong pro-life. The issue with the abortion will be on the ballot in the fall, and that'll take it out of the hands of the legislature. So it'll no longer be a legislative issue. We should encourage ballot initiatives that are pro-life and allow the voters to have their input moving forward. However, I will always stand pro-life. I believe life starts at inception, and I will never stray from that.
Gotcha. So as a follow-up to that, do you believe Arizona lawmakers were right to repeal the territorial era law that bans abortions in all cases except for to save the mother's life?
Are you asking me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll do you.
Yes. No, I obviously believe that there's going to be circumstances where we have to look at the health and condition of the mother. But the problem is that this is such a very divisive issue that it's really hard to put a definition, because if you give a little, then it gets taken to the next extreme. And what I mean by that is we heard in the last election term was they were talking about third trimester abortions, this, that, and the other. At what point do they determine that one life is worth saving over another? And that's the moral conundrum we deal with the abortion issue, which is why it has been as polarizing as it's been for as long as it has been. Is we have to look at the health and safety of both the mother and the child. But we can't forsake one of them for the other one, if that makes sense.
Okay, and Ms. Fink, would you have overturned that territorial era law?
No, I would not have. I would have encouraged maybe an amendment, like I stated, the commitment of a crime and also to define in regards to miscarriages. And I think it's helpful to know kind of a little bit the history. My understanding of the history of the law, the Roe law, was that back in the day, there was, brothels and that. And what was happening is that basically prostitutes would get pregnant and then they would send them out, get them abortion, and put them back to work. And that is awful. And unfortunately, we kind of see that today, with the sex trafficking and all that, to get work out of them. So I believe it actually was protecting women from being abused and, used by, like you say, men, and also from people who wanted to make money.
All righty. What is your stance on the recently implemented school voucher program in Arizona? And as an Arizona state legislature, would you try to make any changes to the existing voucher program? And I believe, Mr. Morris, you're up first on this one.
So this is a very interesting topic, as I was a product of two teacher households growing up. And then in conjunction with that, my stepmom, after my mother passed away, was the president of the Phoenix Union High School District for many years. So this has been an issue that I've had a lot of discussion with both in my local district, but also at home, because the idea of the ESAs is, and how it's been implemented, is very functional. It allows parents to basically take the funding for their kids and offer them the kind of education that they want or that they need. So it covers so many different bases. So it's not limiting a child to attend a school that maybe isn't performing the way it should have been. When I was younger, we had the district boundaries and you had to apply for a variance if you wanted to move school. So if you were at a school where you weren't comfortable, you were at the mercy of legislators or the board to determine whether or not you were eligible to move. I've watched our school funding, while still in the top 5 in the nation, our test scores are at the bottom 2 in the nation. Now there's a big flip there from the 90s when we were at the top in the nation as far as test scores are concerned. The only way we can get back to that is to look at how do we make our schools more competitive. And if they've realized now that they have to compete instead of just allowing the same things to go on, then maybe they'll see some improvement in the public school system. But I believe that no child should be deprived the education that they deserve. And the ESA law does allow everybody to have that same level playing field for the best education possible for their children.
Okay, and Mrs. Fink, how do you feel about ESAs in general?
Yeah, and you mentioned voucher, but it's actually not necessarily called a voucher. It's an empowerment scholarship account. And I'm definitely for school choice. We have to decide who is in charge of a child's education, who has the responsibility. Well, actually in state law, it does say who has the ultimate authority over that. It's not the state, it is the parent. And so therefore, this ESA actually is following and right in line with current state law in regards to the Parental Bill of Rights. And so therefore, I would not make any changes to it at this time. And we have so many kids. I have 6 kids. Did they all learn the same? Absolutely not. And I did have kids at different schools. And it is according to the needs of the child. And so, and who has the best knowledge as to how to meet the needs of the child? It's the parent. And especially now that we see so many different things, there's so many different methods and way of teaching and all that, that I believe that right now, I would not make any changes. I would preserve that. And it actually right now, the ESAs is half the cost. It's almost $15,000 for a district student, but for the ESAs, it's only $7,000. So it's a cost savings as well.
Gotcha. Okay, and outgoing LD27 Representative Ben Toma actually championed a recent voter referral, HCR 2060, or the Secure the Border Act, which will be on the ballot this November. It would allow local law enforcement officers to arrest undocumented border crossers and implement a handful of other measures. I'm wondering if you'll support this initiative, and do you believe the role of a state lawmaker, what do you believe the role of a state lawmaker is when it comes to regulating Arizona's border with Mexico. And I believe Ms. Fink, you're up first.
Yes, thank you. I'm definitely in support of it. If you realize in the U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, it says that the United States shall guarantee to every state, first of all, a republican form of government, and then protect each of them against invasion. Now, also, you go to Article 1, and where it states in Section 10 that no state shall engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit delay. So right now we have thousands of illegals coming across the border. We don't know exactly where they're all coming from. We know a lot of them are foreign agents. They have caught terrorists coming across the border. And so therefore, we could say, we are being invaded. And then also imminent danger. We have a lot of fentanyl coming across. We have Arizonans dying every day from the fentanyl that's coming across. And that's not including the human trafficking, the violent crimes that are being committed against Arizonans, and potential terrorist attacks because of an open Arizona border. I think it's just common sense, and it's constitutional, both especially in the U.S. Constitution. And the states have a duty to protect their citizens. And again, right now, the U.S. government, according to the U.S. Constitution, is not doing their job. And so therefore, the states can step in and protect their border.
Thank you. And Mr. Morris?
Well, Lisa hit the nail right on the head. It is the job of the legislature to protect the rights of the citizens. And by putting it on the ballot, this was a very smart and calculated move that Mr. Toma actually made, because he brought it back as a ballot initiative to put it on the ballot to allow the voters to have an input on this. Obviously, right now we have a very divisive House, Senate, and governor. So getting certain bills or certain laws passed that a lot of people want. One of the biggest issues we hear in our meet and greets and out while we're campaigning is, what are you going to do about the border? Mm-hmm. This is a problem that transcends party, it transcends age difference, it transcends every type of demographic understanding, because people are really do see that the impact that we have with this unfettered, this uncontrollable influx of illegal immigration, not only at the crime in the street levels, but also the drain on our city resources and our state resources, and what we're looking at as far as the overall safety of our neighborhoods. In working with a lot of law enforcement, this is a prime concern for every single agency I work with, and that goes from sheriff's offices all the way up to the local precincts and the people who are handling the city laws. So we have to really look at the fact that our government has failed us. The government has failed us in the way that they secure the border, and we have to start taking our matters into our own hands. I would support measures that do that and that make it more difficult for illegal immigrants to come here, and to make it a crime to come here illegally. I mean, that's what the whole idea of it is it's illegal with the way you're crossing the border. So we need to enforce that.
Gotcha. And I wonder, Mr. Morris, with your interaction with law enforcement agencies, have you heard any concern about the potential strain on them if this measure passes? There's
a strain already on every single agency out there. The strain of this, without having something in place, is already pushing them to limits where they can't even get to normal calls anymore. Already we have an issue with staffing in all police departments. There's not an agency across Arizona that is staffed fully. In fact, every single one of them is offering hiring bonuses, lateral bonuses, and whatnot to try to get their numbers up. This is not going to strain those resources. What it's going to do is it's going to allow additional empowerment to hopefully start to control some of the uncontrolled tides that are coming here and flooding our streets with the illegal immigration, the drugs, the sex trafficking. I mean, all of it comes with that.
Gotcha. And Ms. Fink, do you want to respond to the issue of a potential strain on law enforcement?
Yeah, I think what you need to do is you need to look at what the root cause is. And so we're seeing increased crime, increased other problems. What is the root cause? And I'm telling you, a root cause, a lot of it is the open border. So if we close down the border, we'll have less drugs coming across, we'll have less trafficking, we'll have less violent crimes because we won't be having, cartels and that coming over here. So I believe by doing the border, yes, there may be an additional strain on them. And I agree with that. But the fact is that if you can take them off the streets immediately, you're going to have a decrease in crime, and then that will ultimately lead to less strain on our law enforcement. That's my belief.
Okay, and I believe you both brought up the issue of trafficking in this topic. We have a voter question that came in. What will you do to help protect women and children from the rise of sex trafficking in the United States? And I believe, Mr. Morris, if you want to go first.
We need stronger penalties. This obviously we need to be able to try to help as many people as we can, but it comes down to penalties. The penalties for the crime need to be to the point where they need to be to the point where there's no value. The risk reward needs to go away. We've done a lot of campaigning down at the Capitol for child endangerment, sex trafficking. We've gone through this and we've realized that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I hate to say it, but it's a business. And anytime you have a business that's enticed by the possibility of making money or having increased wealth, there's going to be people who participate in it, regardless of the moral or legal obligations that are out there. It's important that we really focus on what can we do to really take these people off the streets when we get them, when we are. But we have to have good law enforcement. We have to have good court systems that can run through this, and we have to have laws that protect women and children from these kinds of crimes happening. And the only way to do that is to really crack down on enforcement.
Okay, and Ms. Fink?
Well, this is interesting because it might segue into another topic, but I, as president of the Protect Arizona Children Coalition, we have been trying to stop comprehensive sexuality education. Oftentimes what happens is that when you're exposed to porn or to sexually explicit material, it breaks down those natural barriers that kids have in regards to potential predators. And so unfortunately, we are promoting that. And also, we also tried to get, I testified for a bill and Governor Hobbs vetoed it. It was also in regards to porn, but in regards to verification of age before somebody could get onto a porn site, and she vetoed that. And so a lot of that porn is driving a lot of the trafficking of women and children. And so we need to stop that as well. People say it's a First Amendment right, but a First Amendment right, it stops when the rights of another person is being violated. And unfortunately, with pornography, the rights of women and children are being violated for that business. And so I think, taking it also in regards to what Mr. Morris said in regards to penalties, I believe we need to up the penalty. In fact, in regards to sex crimes, I can't remember which state it is, but they've now given it the death penalty. I mean, that is severe, and that makes you think twice in regards to that. But that is something that we need to do. We have the laws. We need to stop the businesses that thrive off of it, and that is, porn and that. And we also need to stop sexualizing children. We have had books in our schools that are graphic. Very graphic. And so again, and that encourages sexual activity that again brings down those borders and makes these children much more vulnerable to to people who would take advantage of them.
Okay, and you mentioned upping the penalties. I wonder if elected as a state legislator, are there any measures you would fight for in terms of what kind of content is allowed in schools, Ms. Fink?
I've been doing that. We have had laws. I've been doing that for quite some time. And what we have done is that, first of all, if there's anything dealing with sexuality, in the sex ed as well, it has to be parental opt-in. Unfortunately, schools are not following that. And we have had parents that have been frustrated, or they don't necessarily want to say anything. So therefore, we need to do that. So I've been fighting for that for quite some time. And unfortunately, those laws are not being followed. And what's happening is that parents are putting it forth in board meetings, and they're getting blowback in bringing up this sexually explicit stuff. They've been told, well, you can't say that at a board meeting, at a public board meeting. And it's like, well, this is what you're teaching in the classroom. What do you mean? Why are you allowing this? And so, no, we have also where you can't, we tried to pass one where there'd be more of a penalty. And it was actually with Senator Hoffman, and we supported that bill, but it was, I can't remember if it was vetoed or it just didn't get the votes to go through. But we need to up the penalty. And we're getting a lot of pushback from a lot of the educational establishment on regards to that, which is disappointing.
And Mr. Morris, I see you nodding your head. Do you agree with that?
I'll tell you, Lisa and I are on point with a bunch of the same issues. And one of the things that I'm tired is seeing these kids politicized, but exposed to the sexual content they're being exposed to at such a young age. I think back to my days when I was in the school system and at kindergarten, first, second, third grade, I didn't have to deal with any of these issues. These kids are being force fed. And I say this without any reservation, because parents are being omitted from the process of deciding whether or not this is what's right for their children. And this is one of the primary reasons why ESA is such a value to our education system, is that it puts the control back with the parents. You cannot, a child is raised by his parents. That is a moral obligation. That is the obligation of the parent to raise that child and make those decisions for that child, not the school districts. Again, I was a product of a 2-teacher household, and my parents would never have thought of some of the things that are happening today. They can't believe the way that things have changed in our schools. But we have to protect our children, and one of the ways we need to do that is by stop sexualizing them at such a young age, or allowing them to the sexualized content that they're being given at such young ages.
And Nicole, do you mind if I say just a little thing here? Also, the thing is too, is we have some criminal statutes harmful to minors. And basically, it's a class 4 felony, and they describe what the content is for harmful to minors, and it is basically what we're seeing in a lot of the schools, and it's in the statute already. We just need to enforce it.
Gotcha. Okay, before we move on to another voter question, just want to remind anyone watching, you can email any questions to debates@kc-a.com. You can text 408-302-1810. A really popular voter question we've been getting is, what will you do to address Arizona's housing and homelessness crisis? I believe, Ms. Fink, you're up next. Kind of lost track.
I know. Well, I kind of snuck in there a little bit. Okay, so it was the homeless and housing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things is in regards to the homeless, because I've worked with various organizations in helping out with the homeless. First of all, we go back to what the root cause is. We see a lot of problems with the border, okay, coming across, and with the drugs coming across. So that's a big thing. And that's what they have: episodic homelessness and chronic homelessness. And usually the chronic homelessness is because of drugs. But also, we don't have much in the way of mental health. The hospitals, we don't have much of that. And a lot of these also have mental health issues. So that's something else that we need to look at in being able to expand to provide the mental health services. The other thing is a lot of them are veterans. And I think we need to do a lot better in regards to providing services for the veterans. They have taken it to serve our country. They have, PTSD. There's other various ways to help overcome a lot of that PTSD, and not with drugs. I'm also a functional and integrative dietitian, and so I've done a lot of the functional stuff. So there's a lot of things there that we can do to help them. So, and then also, I will tell you, we did have a problem up at where my charter school was. And this is something that there's a lot of debate on this as well. But they had a juvenile detention center that wasn't too far. We'll come to find out that they were housing homeless there, but the homeless there's a lot of problems with them being sex offenders. And they cannot go into the shelters for obvious reasons. And so they were housing the sex offenders there. We got rid of that because they were letting them out during the day, and we had high schools and we had our elementary school and we had all these. And so so that's another thing is and that's not an easy situation. Do we lock up sex offenders for life and not let them out, or what? I mean, that's a debate that still needs to be done. But that's another issue with sex offenders. And like I said, when I went working with the city of Phoenix, the police, in regards to homelessness, they said they're very nervous when they see people going out and giving out people, using their kids to give out stuff to the homeless, because it's like a lot of them are sex offenders, and to protect the kids. So it's a multifaceted issue, and there's a multifaceted answers to it. But anyway, so there's not, like I said, one solution for every situation in regards to the homelessness.
Okay, and Mr. Morris?
The idea of homelessness and the issue of homelessness is multi-pronged. And there's, again, like as Ms. Fink said, there's no one route approach to it. I've always said that people are homeless by chance, by choice, or by circumstance. And the problem we have with that is that I'm talking a high number of that are by choice. They do that because of the mental issues and because of the drug use. And I also am a big proponent of looking at our mental health system, that we have taken a lot of those resources off of the streets and the access to the people over the last 15 years. I mean, we have one of the lowest involvements of mental access or mental health facilities or mental health awareness for people that are experiencing homelessness. It's a big challenge as far as how this goes. We need legislation that not only aids the homeless, but also tackles the root causes. So looking at that, again, the border issue keeps coming up because we have this uncontrolled drug use. Drug use is very rampant in the communities. I've actually been out serving the homeless for over 20 years. I do a number of feeding the homeless, make sure they have blankets, clothes. And while I'm doing this, I'm trying to better understand how do we make decisions as legislators that are going to be, that's actually going to have an impact to correct this issue. One of the other things that I'm really a proponent against is the ongoing methadone clinics. We recently had a methadone clinic open up in our district about 5 years ago at 28th Avenue in Cactus. With that, brought a substantial increase in crime within 5 miles radius of the methadone clinic. And that also included rampant homelessness. We're up 500%, crimes up 800%, property crime, violent crimes up 300%, and sex crimes up 170% in our district. And that is crazy to me. So we have to look at all of these things as together, instead of trying to look at it, how do we just figure out one thing? The biggest issue that states and cities have is when trying to house homeless is that they then become landlords. You put a person in a facility, or you put them into a residence, and you control the residence, you control the cost, the water, the sewer, the upkeep. Now you control the safety and security. So it's a very trying issue that cities and states have to deal with. But we need to find those solutions and work with these nonprofits to help really find a way to expand our housing, but really need to focus on our mental health. And I think that that's going to help drive the number of homeless down in our state.
Okay, and a very connected but different issue. How would you address the affordable housing crisis in the state? Mr. Morris, if you want to go first.
This is something that I've spoken at great length with the mayor of Peoria. His name's Jason Beck. There's a fine line between trying to control housing, where you start to have an infringement on the ability of normal inflationary things to happen. As homeowners, people invest in their homes as they look to retirement. So they plan on those appreciating. What drives the price of housing is demand. And Arizona is now a big demand central because there's so much business moving here. I can't believe that the childhood home that I grew up in, that my parents paid under $50,000 for in the 70s, has just been appraised at over $550,000. It's not even affordable. My parents could never have afforded that. But again, that's another challenge, just like the homeless situation, that we need to figure out how do we bring more affordable housing, but control that without infringing on the rights of businesses to do business here. And that's a big question. That's just going to take a lot more research, a lot more time to better understand how we can go with that.
Okay, and Ms. Fink?
Well, my answer will be very different in the sense that what we're seeing with inflation, unfortunately, is what we call our monetary system, and it's fiat money. We do not have a good solid system, and we used to be gold backed. And so once we went off the gold standard back in the early 1970s, we have seen inflation skyrocket. And that's when we've seen a lot of the inflationary pressures on housing and everything else. And so, and the other thing is energy also makes prices go up. And unfortunately, what Biden did is that we were self-reliant in energy, and now we, in specific gas and that, now we're dependent on outside sources. So again, that drives up costs in regards to, and then the other thing is that we have a lot of problems with excessive regulation, government regulation. And with an increase in government regulation, that also increases the cost of everything. So my thing would be is, well, first of all, the monetary system, we need to get back to, and that's, unfortunately, that's for Congress. Not each state can take care of that, but there are some things that we can do here to make its monetary system at least more compatible with the free market. But we need to look at the root cause. And unfortunately, Biden economics is one of those things. And second of all is government regulation. And then, of course, the energy costs. And we need to become Arizona. If we could become self-reliant as much as possible on energy, we could also see a huge decrease in expenses in regards. And that would help out with the housing crisis, because therefore you have sound money and you have the inputs into making a house come down in price as well.
Okay, and speaking of Biden, do you believe he was duly elected? Do you believe former President Donald Trump's claims that the 2020 election was stolen? Ms. Fink, you're up first.
I do believe there's a lot of irregularities, and yeah, I think I do believe that Biden did not win because the amount of votes that he got was the highest we've ever seen. And even from those that run in the past. So there was a lot of irregularities. And so I think it should have been redone, and I think it should have been a paper count, paper ballot count, because there was too many irregularities to do that. And then when you do that, also when you audit anything, like with our school, audit anything, if there's any problems, you have to go back and you have to fix it and bring it back and to show that it is good. And with what we saw was, and you saw it on the media and all that. So yeah, I have some real concerns, and I do question the validity of Biden's election.
What about you, Mr. Morris?
I'm a big proponent of one vote, one day, on paper, in person, except for extreme circumstances at smaller precinct votings. I believe that there was, again, a number of irregularities in the last election, that these results should not have been certified without further investigation. There was too many things that, taken on their own merits, would be questionable, but with the mass numbers of things that have happened during the election, they should have been further investigated and prior to certifying this election.
Okay, so it sounds like both of you did not believe that President Joe Biden was duly elected. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, my thing is that the votes, excuse me, it was certified, so therefore he is elected. They went and certified the election. Whether I believe, again, and as Mr. Moore said, whether there should have been investigation before those elections were certified, that should have happened beforehand. But because it went through the process right now, yes, he is elected. So it went through the process. But yes, I still think that there was a lot of issues with the election.
Okay, and Mr. Morris, can you just clarify?
Again, if we're to believe in the process, which we're running for an office, so we need to believe in the process as well. He was certified. Do I agree with that certification, or do I believe the certification should have happened in the expeditious manner that it did, or should it have gone through more investigation? But as far as the validity of his presidency by our law, he is the president of our United States. So that's neither here nor there at this point. I mean, it's a very, this topic is one of those topics where there's no good answer, because the reality is that 50% of everybody's going to disagree with anything we say anyway. So I just think that if there's questions, that if the questions are, if there's nothing to hide, why would you not give everything to make sure that, hey, I'm participating and making sure that there's no questions? If I'm not guilty of something, I'm an open book, and that's the reality.
Okay, and Mr. Morris, you did touch on this a little bit, but are there any other policy plans you have and you would put in place to alter the state's election system?
Well, again, I'm going to continue to say we need to look at the way our election process goes. We need to clean up our voter rolls. We need to make sure that those who are deceased, moved, or are not on the voter rolls. I'm not a big fan of mailing out just blanket early voting or early ballots to mail-in voting at all. We are doing it unabated, where sometimes more than one ballot is being sent out. And I do believe that we should have one day, one vote on paper, in person, at smaller precinct votings with hand counts. I think that the machines need to go away. And those are processes that I would look at changing as being in office.
Okay, and what about you, Ms. Fink?
Well, I think the Arizona Constitution has the answer. In the Arizona Constitution, first of all, it states that the election needs to happen on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and then it goes on to the year, whatever. So that tells you one day, right? But then it gives, exceptions for those like in the military and that as well. The other thing is that all of the laws that the state legislatures would pass in the future, they had to make sure that secrecy in voting shall be preserved. Well, what we have seen is, ballots being thrown into the, some basket or whatever. That's not preserving the secrecy. And actually, when you do mail-in ballots, you don't know how secret is that person when they're doing it. Are other people on there seeing what they're doing or how they're filling out their ballot and all that? That's not preserving the secrecy. So that's one. The other thing it talks about here, it talks about who can vote, and they need to be a citizen of the United States of the age of 18 years or over, and also resided in the state for a period of time. So again, there's the answer as to how we should do our elections. So we just need to go back and look at all of our state laws, and do they are in alignment with the Arizona Constitution. Also, as Mr. Morstead talked about, is paper ballots. In fact, I was watching Taiwan's election process, and very interesting. As you could see them, they would look at their ballot, then they go up like this, they're checking the watermark to make sure it's there, and then they would move on. And they went away from computers because they had concern of China having too much influence in their elections. And so they got rid of all of the machines, and they're very strict. And it's one day, we have a lot more exceptions than they did to make sure and preserve that the voice of the people were actually being heard. We also need to go back to precinct voting. We need to also, I believe, put more penalties in regards to if the chain of custody is not being followed. Because that's very important to be able to have that chain of custody when that ballot has been printed. And that's why you can do precinct voting, because you know how many ballots you need to print. When you do voting centers, you don't know. And that's what happens when they print on site and then they don't go in the machines, and the printers don't work and all that. So therefore, that would solve a lot of problems. But again, I would go back and I would look at all of our laws. Are they in alignment? If they're not, then we need to get rid of them.
Okay. I want to move into the topic of bipartisanship in general. Governor Katie Hobbs will be the governor next session. Excuse me. What's your approach to bipartisanship in general? I believe Ms. Fink, you're up first.
Well, I tell people I'm going to stick with promoting the constitutional principles, because those principles have, by following those throughout our history, has provided more wealth for everyone. And so, and, you know, freedom and as well. So to me, reaching across that, my thing is to stick with the constitutional principles because I want freedom and prosperity for everyone. That includes Democrat, independent, Republican, you know, party not declared, young, old, it doesn't matter what race. It's freedom and prosperity for everyone. So I will stand on those principles because I believe compromising on those principles will actually decrease freedom and decrease prosperity for everyone.
Okay, Mr. Morris.
This is another area where we totally agree. If you follow the Constitution and you do principled laws that are based on the Constitution, you should be able to reach a bipartisanship. The issue that we have as legislators, a lot of time people forget that they're not just there representing their party. They're representing their neighbors, neighbors, and all the people in their districts and all the people in the state. So it's important for me that we look at, are we making good, sound decisions for all the people in Arizona? Are these things that are going to benefit the people of Arizona? And then you look across the aisle and say, how do I get these things done? And by looking at positive leadership, looking at positive interaction, to try to come up with an idea of like, you know, we've lost this idea that we can come to a compromise, and there has to be compromise in any legislative session. I don't care who it is. The reason why we have two parties is to create a balance so that one party doesn't feel like they're misrepresented or not being represented fully, or the people's wants and needs of the people are being represented fully. However, there is no compromise when it comes to the Constitution, and that's what we need to follow. And that's the easiest guideline for making good, sound decisions and being able to reach across the line saying, hey, there's no discussion. It's just what it is. So that's, you know, is it necessary? Yeah, absolutely, it's necessary. And we need to get to a point where we're all communicating on the same level.
Okay. Arizonans are suffering some of the highest inflation rates in the country. So what, if anything, can you do as a state lawmaker to help ease some of the inflation and its burdens on Arizona's families? Mr. Morris, I believe.
This is another one that goes back, as a lot of the inflationary measures are coming from federal decisions, uncontrolled spending at our government. You know, we are just printing money, and when you do that, you're obviously going to devalue the value of our dollar. Ms. Fink hit on it earlier when she said that at one point we used to have the gold-backed system. There's nothing backing our money now. It's just a computer system where they just print more and they decide what their own debt ceiling is. I don't know about anybody in Arizona, but I don't have that ability where I can just create my own debt limit, but we allow the government to continue to do so. There's a number of things that we can attack at a local level that will help to reduce some of those impacts. And a lot of that is getting some of the taxes what we have in there by those budget cuts, be giving the money back to the people. But that's only a small portion of it. We have to look at it as there's a bigger issue here, and that's in our federal government. So there's things that we can do at a local level, but we need to really figure out how do we approach our federal lawmakers to help ease some of the burdens from that level.
Okay, are there any examples of those local or statewide level changes that you would propose to help ease that burden?
Well, again, some of the budget cuts will help to where you're not having to continue to tax the residents of Arizona for every little thing. That's what budget cuts are for. When you own a business or when you run a business, the idea is you have a certain amount of money that you have and you operate within that money. If you don't, then you have to go out and gain new revenue. The problem is with gaining new revenue in the government is that gaining new revenue means additional taxes. So we need to look at being more efficient, more effective from a local level. How do we run our state better so that we can reduce some of the tax burden on the people of Arizona?
Okay, and Ms. Fink?
Well, there's various ways. First of all, a lot of politicians, they campaign on protecting individual rights, but also I am also campaigning on protecting state rights, because what's happened is that we have seen a huge concentration of power in Washington, D.C. because the states haven't stood up for our rights. And so one of the things with the inflationary pressures that we're having is we're seeing a lot more regulation from the federal government. Now, Thomas Jefferson said this. He called it the principle of nullification. He told the states that say, hey, if the federal governments do something that is not within their delegated authority, kind of in today's vernacular is kind of like stay in your lane, okay? So right now, like the EPA is driving up huge our energy costs. Energy, again, is so important in being able to bring down some of that inflationary pressure. And so do we stand up for the state of Arizona and say, hey, EPA, we can't abide by those because we need the energy. We need cheaper energy for our citizens. That's one of the ways that we can help bring down the inflationary pressures. We also could go back in regards to with the economy. Utah has gold and silver as legal tender. Also, Texas had been working on a gold-backed state bank to be able to get some sound money in regards to that. But we can't coin the money, we can't print it, but it's just to be able to have that reserve. So with some of that, those pressures in regards to the inflation, again, we can't control the money printing. And unfortunately, you look at history and money printing is what causes inflation. And so we need to put pressure on our federal representatives and senators to say, you are supposed to coin money, not print it. You are supposed to coin it. That's what it says in the Constitution. And there's a reason for it. I won't go into the history behind that. But we need to get back to sound money, because that is what's killing us right now. But again, there's things that we can do. Government does not produce anything. It only takes. And so we need to be able to put more money into the economy. And one of the best ways to do that is to cut taxes, to cut spending, and to be able to give it back to the people. And the other thing with inflationary is, again, this is EPA related. We're paying a lot more money in gas because we have to have this certain blend. Well, we need to. So why do we need this blend? We need to get back to saying, okay, the state needs to say, hey, we need to do something what's best for our citizens. And, we're not going to, we can't abide by this right now. And so to be able to open that up to make it much cheaper and better in regards to inflationary costs. So again, that increases costs, food, materials, supplies, just for somebody to go to their job and back. That is all causing inflationary issues. And we need to look at that.
Okay, and I want to start to close out with one of the biggest issues facing Arizona right now, water. What improvements or reforms would you advocate for in the state's legislature to approach groundwater management to address current challenges and future needs? Ms. Fink, you're up first.
Well, first of all, we have to have good data. And my concern right now is they're saying, well, we only have this amount of water. Well, there's some other conflicting data that says, well, maybe, we are fine. So we need to make sure and have good data to see exactly how much are our groundwater reserves. So that's one thing. The other thing that's very disturbing is that I know Senator Kerr was part of, it was a water management committee with the governor. Now she left because she says the government's trying to take over more of the water. So we need to make sure and preserve property rights as well in regards to that water. Also, we need to look at in regards to what are ways that we can help again, getting rid of regulations, gray water, we don't allow gray water. That would decrease. I've seen different percentages that could be 40, 60% of water usage that we could utilize. So those are some of the things, again, regulations and government interference has really created some real issues. But we also need to look at how the water is divided up. I know right now, we're going to be renegotiating the Colorado River Basin water agreement, which of course incorporates several states. And Arizona kind of got the short end of the stick last time, and so they're working on. And then, again, it would be the legislature, but they're working on negotiating that so that it would be a much better situation for Arizona in regards to getting water from the Colorado Water Basin.
Okay, and Mr. Morris?
I think a lot of people miss the fact that there's 40% of all water use that's supplied to Arizona is through the groundwater use every year annually. But of that, 80% of Arizona has no regulations on the pumping of groundwater. So what we've done is we've got this resource in all our surface water. We have so much regulation and conservation on the water that comes on our surface, but we don't have enough regulation or oversight on the groundwater. So we have, in one instance, we have some Saudi Arabian farmers that moved their farms here from Saudi Arabia to produce alfalfa. They've bought thousands and thousands of acres. They're putting wells in well below, thousands of feet below whatever most wells will go down, and they're pumping unabated to grow alfalfa crops, which have no real impact to our state economy. This alfalfa is grown, shipped, and taken out of the state, and alfalfa uses 70% more groundwater than any other crop that's out there. That's just one example of what I consider to be groundwater abuse. And because we don't have enough regulation on groundwater or enough understanding of, again, the depths and what we really have to store, because the data is not there, we need to look at how do we stop foreign-owned entities from owning land here and using up our resources. Because at the end of the day, groundwater, if we lose groundwater, Arizona becomes a ghost town, and it'll be the largest ghost town in the United States. But we are dependent, 40% of our annual use is dependent on groundwater. But at the same token, 80% of our communities don't have zero regulations on how groundwater is used or abused. And we know that there's data centers that are pumping groundwater to use for cooling towers. We know that the Saudi Arabian farmers are using it. Nestle just moved a water plant here to bottle water. This is not the place to do that. So we need to look at what kind of businesses are coming here. How do we control that kind of pumping, and how do we preserve the groundwater? That's a huge issue for me. It's one of the ones I've been campaigning on since I started this over 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to go ahead and move to closing comments since Ms. Fink started opening comments. Mr. Morris, if you want to start with your closing whenever you're ready.
Just to reiterate, my name is Brian Morris. I am running for the Arizona State House of Representatives in LD27. I'm a local-born resident, native Arizonan who lives in the community. I believe we're fighting for the future of Arizona, and this is one of the most important elections that we're going to have ever in the history of Arizona. My key proponents or my key issues are obviously protecting groundwater. I do look at something we haven't discussed at all, but using some prison reform, and of course, figuring out how to protect our streets through several different programs, which will help to adjudicate some of the homelessness that's out there, but obviously getting the drug use and the crime under control while supporting our law enforcement officers. I hope that in the primary here in July, we'll get people will vote for me, and then obviously carry me into the November election. Will put me in the office so we can see what we can do to really bring the state around.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fink?
Well, I'll keep it short. Again, my name is Lisa Fink. I am running for the Arizona State House of Representatives for Legislative District 27. And as I mentioned, I am running as a principled constitutional conservative. My belief is that many of the issues that we're having right now, whether it be the economy, the border, all of those things, we have strayed from constitutional principles, and we're getting bad results. My effort would be, if I am elected, to be able to stand up and return to those constitutional principles so we can have freedom and prosperity for everyone.
Okay, well, this concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the July 30th primary election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information.